It's Phil Steele Friday here on In the Gun, and we will have his thoughts on the West Virginia Mountaineers matchup against Texas Tech, along with some of the biggest matchups around college football. It's Separation Saturday, Championship Saturday, essentially. We'll have his thoughts here on Black Friday on ITG.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With special guest, Phil Steele.
Author of the College Football Bible.
You can see things before they happen.
Well, I definitely like West Virginia's offensive line.
All you got to do is bet on the winner and you'll never lose.
I like the Mountaineers to win this one.
Taylor, touchdown!
To me, the key matchup here is that West Virginia run game. Hey, a real pleasure being on. Thanks for having me on the In the Gun podcast.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 217. It's another edition of Phil Steele Friday, the final one here of the regular season. I'm Skylar Callahan. That is the signal caller, Jed Drenning. And as always, this episode of ITG is brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting leads. Go to BetOnline, where the game starts. And, of course, a major shout-out to JR and the fine folks at Toothman Ford, where we all know cars cost less in Grafton. We'll talk with Phil Steele here in a little bit about the Mountaineers matchup in Lubbock. But first, a little bit of a recap from our wagers last weekend with West Virginia and UCF. Jed, you told me off air that you were very blunt with it, that I've stunk it up in terms of the Big 12 weekly picks, but I'm not doing so bad here on these wagers.
No, I'm doing my best Scholar impersonation with these. You're smoking me, you know. Quick shout out. We're taping Thanksgiving morning to drop this Black Friday. Quick shout out to the men's basketball team.
Yes. Hats off.
Yeah, wow. Big win over number 3 Gonzaga. Big win over number 3 Gonzaga. Let's hope we keep that rolling. But as you said, let's look at last week's prop fun. RJ Harvey. We had a question with RJ Harvey and Garrett because both of them in their respective positions led the Big 12 in runs of 10 plus yards. Harvey actually led the nation with 44 runs of 10 plus. Garrett led the nation, or led Power 4 among all quarterbacks, runs of 10 plus with 29. So our question was over under 10 plus yard runs by the two of them combined. RJ Harvey and Garrett combined. Over under 4.5. We both took under. Scott, this was way over 7. Harvey had 5.
Yeah.
Garrett had 2. Way over 4.5. So we both missed that one. The last time we talked about this, the last time UCF played Morgantown over 20 years ago, the two teams combined to go 1 of 27 on third down. Heading into the game, they had the two lowest ranked third down defenses in the Big 12. Question number 2 was, which offense will have a higher success rate on third down? We both picked UCF. The answer was actually West Virginia, 44% success to UCF's 33, plus West Virginia 4 of 4 on fourth down. So transition downs, we kicked it. We were 12 of 18. So we're both over 2. So you see how low the bar has been set for you to beat me already. Okay. So heading into the final prop fun last week, heading into the game, UCF led the Big 12 with 44 rush attempts per game. WVU was number 3 with 40 rush attempts per game. The question was, and we mentioned that last year in Orlando, West Virginia had 50 rush attempts compared to UCF's 33. This kind of unfolded like that. Question number 3 was, which team, quite simply, will have more rushing attempts? You said West Virginia. I said UCF. By a wide margin, it was West Virginia. It was much closer to the 50-33 in Orlando last year. West Virginia ran the ball 54 times last Saturday in the win over UCF, while holding UCF to 34 in large measure because they kept them off the field. The offense did its part in playing keep away, and the defense did its part in holding UCF as an offense below its scoring average, below its total offense average. So good football against the most explosive offense in the Big 12. Seems like we say that every week, but UCF is the team that leads the Big 12 in total offense, and we held them below their averages enough to find a way to win number 6, get to win number 6, get bowl eligible, and head down to Lubbock with all these crazy mathematical possibilities with us and 74 other Big 12 teams still having a chance to, if you get your abacus out, having a chance to get in.
Yeah, it is crazy. And like Wes said on the preview, it's the first thing that popped in my mind too is Lloyd Christmas going, we have a chance?
Oh, yeah.
So
what a week for that. What a week for that meme, right?
So West Virginia's still alive in the Big 12 title race. And yeah, it did feel like they did hold on to the ball forever in that game. And I went back and looked because I was curious. It felt like every time West Virginia has dominated TOP, they've won the game. And that has been the case. Anytime that they've had 35 minutes or more of time of possession, they are 3-0 this season. Don't know if – I mean, actually, you might have a good chance of doing it this weekend as fast as Texas Tech likes to play. And if you can play to your tempo, then maybe that's the case out there in Lubbock. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll get Phil Steele here in here on In the Gun to break down the top 25 and some of those big-time matchups in the Big 12 that'll decide those crazy scenarios. But another thank you to Fortis real quick for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Be sure to visit fortis.us.com. Phil Steele on the other side.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
Back in the gun here with Phil Steele. It is Separation Saturday, and a lot of teams looking to find their way into a conference championship. Even West Virginia, believe it or not, they still have a chance here in the final week of the season. Phil, thanks for joining us here on Black Friday. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, and glad you're a part of the show here with us this week.
Hey, it's been a real pleasure doing the show with you guys all year. Can you believe that the football season's practically over right now?
Yeah, it has gone by like a blink of an eye. It's crazy to think that we're already here. Talking bowl games, college football playoff, 12-team format just around the corner for the first time ever. Going to be a lot of fun. Some big-time games coming up this weekend. So let's go ahead and get into some of those. Starting in the top 25, it's the big game between Michigan and Ohio State. Probably not the same intensity level as it's been in years past, with Michigan having a down year, but you just never know in this game. Maybe Michigan throws it all together for one game. I don't see it happening, but Phil, you know this game better than anybody. How likely is it that Michigan hangs around in this game and maybe, just maybe, pulls off a miracle?
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the series history between these two, whenever Ohio State has been this big of a favorite, I'm talking about 20 points or more, they tend to struggle a little bit with Michigan. So it's a situation where when I look at this game, Michigan's playing its best football right now. Their offense finally got going. Now, granted, they've only played Northwestern last week, but I like the way that they're operating with the quarterback situation, and they really do have a good defense. You look at them defensively up front, that defensive line against Ohio State's rebuilt offensive line. Ohio State lost their left tackle earlier in the year. They now lost their center. They only had 115 yards rushing last week against Indiana. They're not dominating up front, and I like Michigan's defensive line, which can be dominating. So that's a good matchup for Michigan. So I could definitely see Michigan staying in this one, keeping it competitive. The negative part, if you're betting Michigan here, is the fact that Ryan Day's playing with legitimate revenge. Let's face it, if he loses to Michigan, they'll probably fire him coming off the field, as you can't lose 4 straight times to Michigan. And he has legitimate revenge on his side. And remember last week when they tucked in that late touchdown against Indiana? He's like, leave no doubt is their motto. And so I could see them putting in a late touchdown, which would upset you. But I'm leaning with Michigan plus the points. My concern would be the fact that Ohio State would put in a late touchdown. As far as the over-under on the game goes, it's really interesting. You look at this game and you think under. But I tell you what, I've been thinking under in this series for years, a lot of times with the matchup. And then you take a look at the point total, 54, 68, 69, 93, 101. They just put up a lot of points in this game for some reason, even though the matchup seemed to scream to the under. So it's a tough one to pick for me. It wouldn't be one of my top plays of the week, but I think it's going to be a really good game, and always excited to see Ohio State and Michigan play.
Well, let's head down south to Clemson. You've been high on Clemson all year. You were kind of the lone gunman standing out there after they got smoked to Georgia, saying not so fast. This is a pretty good Clemson team, and you've been spot on with that all year. It's turned out that they won a lot of football games, positioned themselves pretty well heading into this rivalry game against South Carolina. Meanwhile, South Carolina, really a tale of two seasons. They started spinning their wheels at 3-3. A lot of discontent in Columbia. Shane Beamer was catching some heat. Next thing you know, they rip off 5 straight, and here they are in a very meaningful game against the Clemson Tigers. What do you see unfolding here?
Yeah, it should be a great game. And as you mentioned with Clemson, I think they are one of the better teams in the country. I'm a little concerned about the offensive line right now. When they went and played Pitt 2 weeks ago, they were down 2 starting offensive linemen and lost one in the first series of the game. So their offensive line's a little banged up, and they're taking on one of the best defensive lines in the country. I'm on the Joe Moore Award Committee, and the fellas on the Joe Moore Award Committee watch a ton of film. And at one point in the conversation, I brought up, I'm like, hey, how'd they do against South Carolina's defensive line? And one of the guys said, you don't judge the film by what you do against South Carolina's defensive line. They destroy everybody. So that concerns me, the fact that Clemson's offensive line's banged up against this South Carolina defensive line. But I do think Clemson's a better team. They're at home. I'm going to side with Clemson to come out of here with the win, but it should be a really close game. And hopefully Clemson gets some of those offensive linemen back for this one.
Heading to the Iron Bowl, it's Auburn and Alabama. The Crimson Tide need to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. And for Auburn, they're 5-6. They've had a down year, and a win obviously gets them to a bowl game. But Phil, I don't really know if they care that a win would get them to a bowl game more than it would that it just means they screw up Alabama's chances here. So it's going to be a tough one on the road. But again, these rivalry games, you just never know what's going to happen. What do you see happening here in the Iron Bowl?
Yeah, and the thing about Auburn, there's numerous teams in the country that have a poor record this year that aren't as bad as the record. And I'll hold Auburn in case. If I told you one of these two teams was plus 79 yards per game in SEC play, and the other one was just plus 12 yards per game in SEC play, you'd say, well, yeah, that's the case. But actually, it's Auburn that's plus 79 yards per game, and that was part of the reason I liked them against Texas A&M last week. They were better statistically. They've cut down on the turnovers. The turnovers were the main culprit early on. Remember, in the first 4 games of the season, they were minus 10 in turnovers. They're actually 0 net turnovers since then and have been playing better ball. So a couple of unfortunate breaks here or there. They're much better than the record. But they're coming off a big win where they looked really good last week. Alabama's coming off Jalen Milroe's worst game. I mean, this guy was throwing interceptions, just giving the ball away last week. I look for Jalen Milroe to return to form this week. It's Alabama at home. The home team has absolutely dominated this series, going I believe it's 10-1 against the spread, and 10-1 or something like 8-2 straight up, 10-1 against the spread. So I like the fact that Alabama's at home. I like the fact that they looked so poor last week. They're not going to look that poor again this week. Remember how they looked against LSU a few weeks back? So I'm going to side with Alabama minus the points in this one.
Well, sticking in the SEC, let's head down to the Lone Star State. This is the matchup. This is the game. I think the reason that Texas most desperately wanted into the SEC and the reason that Texas A&M did not want the Longhorns in the SEC. Interesting matchup in this rivalry game. Texas A&M, you mentioned Auburn. Maybe they got caught looking ahead against the Tigers a bit, dropping that 43-41 decision. Meanwhile, heading into this Texas game, you'd think we'd be talking about Sark and the offense, but Texas has the best defense in the SEC to date. And Quinn Ewers hasn't turned the football over, at least hasn't thrown a pick in the last 3 weeks. That's why Texas, I think, is a significant favorite. What do you see playing out here?
First of all, thank goodness this game's back to being played again. It was one of my favorite rivalries, and the fact that it's at A&M, that crowd is going to be remarkable for this one. I do think Texas is the better team, and as you pointed out, Jed, you look at that defense this year, they're holding opponents to 136 yards below their season average. That's number 2 in the country. Now, sort of been a little nonplussed with Texas the last 4 weeks, or last 5 weeks, you could say. The Georgia game, the Vanderbilt game, they weren't awesome. The Florida game, they were taking out a third-string walk-on quarterback and a banged-up secondary, but then they got past Arkansas and got past Kentucky, not really looking like a dominant team. But Texas A&M's likewise. They struggled against Mississippi State on the road. They did beat LSU, but they were outplayed at the half. They were outgained 283-147. They sort of sprung Marcel Reed on LSU in the second half, and that got them back in the game. They got beat by South Carolina, New Mexico State, big deal. And then last week losing to Auburn, a game they trailed 21-0. I think we will see the best game out of both teams in the last 5 weeks. Should be a wonderful game. I think Texas comes out of here with the win, but I believe the lines makers got this one right. They've got Texas about a 6-point favorite in the game, and that's about where I would put it.
Hopping into the Big 12, Phil, and this is the first one that really matters for West Virginia fans. So let's see what your thoughts are here. The Mountaineers need a massive upset from Oklahoma State, who's winless in Big 12 play. Again, it feels like I'm on a repeat record here, but it's just crazy to think that they have not won a game this season with Mike Gundy as their head coach in Big 12 play. But here they are, Colorado coming off a loss. They need this win, too, to keep their Big 12 title and CFP hopes alive. Tell me there's a chance here.
Well, there's always a chance, Skyler, but I wouldn't bank on it. When you look at Oklahoma State, I thought they had a backs-to-the-wall game against Arizona State a few weeks back, a chance to turn their season around. They showed me some life against BYU and Baylor on the road, and then they got dumped by Arizona State. Then they got trashed by TCU on the road. Last week, once again, off a bye. If you're going to have any hope for your season, you need to win this game. And they did play a good game against Texas Tech. It was back forth till the interception return for a touchdown. Sort of changed the margin in it. But yet, once again, a loss. So you wonder what they've got left to play for after backs-to-the-wall home game losses. Now, I do like what I've seen out of the freshman quarterback, Smith. He's looked pretty good. He's hitting 71%. Your hope would be that Colorado looks past Oklahoma State. And they've shown the propensity to, maybe not have their A game every single week. But Oklahoma State's defense is abysmal this year, allowing opponents 114 yards above their season average, number 131 in the country. You got to think Colorado lights them up. So I believe Colorado should be a big favorite in this game.
Well, let's head to Orlando. A battle of 4 and 7 teams. UCF still with the number 1 ranked offense in the Big 12. Utah, of course, with one of the best defenses in the Big 12. Heading into this game, you have UCF pegged at home as a very heavy favorite. That's kind of interesting in its own right. Who do you see getting the win number 5 and why?
I think UCF should be able to get the win at home because Utah's offense is struggling so much. But even last week, they put up 28 points against Iowa State, but only had 9 first downs, 224 yards. In fact, over the last 4 weeks, just 265 yards on offense. But I can't see UCF getting a massive margin in this game for a couple of reasons. First of all, they came into the season expecting to be a Big 12 contender, and they have just 4 wins on the year. So I don't know if there's going to be huge enthusiasm for this final home game. And Utah's got a really good defense. And while Utah's been losing games, they really have only lost 1 game by margin this year, and that was Colorado. And while the final score is 49-24, I thought they played closer than the final score in that game. So they really have played everybody close. Who knows? Kyle Whittingham could announce right before the game that, hey, guys, this is my last game. And then you see Utah playing with their hair on fire. So we don't really know what's going to happen in that respect. So I would lean with Utah plus the points to keep it closer than expected.
This one doesn't have Big 12 title implications. I mean, maybe to some degree it does, or college football playoff implications. But to me, it's one of the best matchups in all of college football that no one's talking about. That's Baylor and Kansas in Waco, two of the hottest teams not only in the Big 12 but in the country. Kansas becomes the first team with a losing record to beat three straight ranked teams. Baylor, meanwhile, has ripped off five straight wins after finding some rhythm with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. This is an amazing matchup to me, Phil. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of back and forth in this game. Should be a lot of points. Kansas looking to get their sixth win to get bowl eligible. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think the over is probably the best play here because Baylor has really turned into an over team. Even though last week's score against Houston was 20-10, Houston's a dead under team. They're just all defense, no offense. But when I look at Baylor, I love the way their offense is operating. Sawyer Robertson has looked great at the quarterback position. He's got a 22-7 ratio. They got Washington, they got Pendergrass, they got an offensive line that's really functioning well. Allowing just 15 sacks all year. Defensively, they've struggled a little, which is surprising because they got Aranda calling the shots there, but they're still not bad. They've been playing a lot of explosive offenses. And then with Kansas, probably my big thing with Kansas was, when they opened up that 1-5 record, everybody's saying how poor they were. And I'm like, hey, they led in the fourth quarter of every single one of those games. They could easily be 6-0 at this point. And they're they're not a 1-5 team. And look what's happened. They almost beat Kansas State on the road, beat Iowa State, a hell of a win, beat BYU. Granted, they did get that fumble punt return late in the game that helped them out, and then waxed Colorado last week. So I can't go against Kansas, but I can't go against Baylor at home. You hit it right on the head, Skylar. I think it's going to be a hell of a game, a higher scoring game, and a fun one to watch. But if you made me pick the game, I'm going to lean a little bit with Baylor at home.
All right, let's head, Phil, to the Duel in the Desert, the Territorial Cup, the first time it's been played as a Big 12 conference game between Arizona State and Arizona. All indications would seem to suggest that Arizona State's going to head down to Tucson and run away with this. You have the revenge factor. Arizona smoked them last year, 59-23, piled up over 600 yards of offense. Kenny Dillingham has that Arizona State team humming. They're running the football well. Of course, a run game always travels well. They're playing saltier defense than most people realize. Outside of the fact that you have to toss everything out for a rivalry game and all things are possible, is there any chance Arizona makes this interesting and steals one at home to close out the season?
I think you hit it right on the head, Jed. The only way that it doesn't happen is if this turns into be one of those rivalry things. Because when I line up these two teams, I think we've got one of the weakest teams in the Big 12 in Arizona. I mean, on a weekly basis, these guys are getting blown out. Basically, the key to stopping Arizona is shut down the Fafita-McMillan combination. Other than that, Arizona has a defense that's below average. They have an offense that struggles, and even with Fafita and McMillan, Arizona State, meanwhile, has just really impressed me the last 4 weeks. That Kansas State game was just absolutely dominant. To go into Kansas State, lead that thing 21-0 at the half, totally dominate the game. Even last week, they led BYU 21-3 at the half. They were dominant, maybe led up a little bit. With Scadaboo, and remember a couple of weeks ago they beat UCF without Scadaboo. Scadaboo's there. They've got Levin at quarterback, who's having a really good year. He's got 18-5 ratio this year, and all the talk about Fafita coming into the season, believe it or not, he's got 17 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions. You're talking about a quarterback that probably read his press clippings a little too much, maybe had a little too much confidence coming into the year, and maybe took a little too many chances with 12 interceptions. So overall, I think Arizona State's clearly the better team. And once again, Jed, you did hit it on the head with that revenge factor. I mean, Arizona kicked their butt last year. It was 38-7 at the half. They had 410 yards offense. Arizona State's laying in wait for them.
Who doesn't love Farmageddon? Last year, this game looked like it was played in a snow globe, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year, but it's going to be cold temperatures once again in the low 20s, it looks like, in Ames between Kansas State and Iowa State. Both, again, still fighting for a chance to punch their ticket to the Big 12 championship in Arlington. Both have a really good resume here, Phil, but they both have a couple of disappointing losses. Coming into this game, who do you think has the edge, the Wildcats or the Cyclones?
Yeah, watching the two teams all year, coming into the year, I thought K-State was clearly one of the top teams in the Big 12. They just haven't played that way. Even go back to that West Virginia game. They led 17-10 at the half, but they got an interception return for a touchdown. West Virginia got stopped on 4th and goal at the 1. West Virginia had a big first down yardage edge, and then West Virginia was just all banged up in the second half. The next week, I thought they would beat Kansas. They escaped with the win. They lost at Houston, got dominated by Arizona State, and finally played a good game last week against Cincinnati. But overall, I go back to the Tulane game earlier in the year. I thought Tulane was a better team in that game. So they haven't been dominant. Iowa State, meanwhile, I would say I've been impressed with Iowa State in 9 of their 11 games. The two I weren't were Texas Tech, which they lost by 1, and that's a game that they actually had the lead in the final seconds. And then the Kansas game on the road, which they lost, gave up 532 yards. Other than that, they played well. And even last week, they only beat Utah by 3, but had a 25-9 first down edge, gave up a couple of return touchdowns, and that's what kept the game close. So been more impressed with Iowa State on the year. They're at home for this one. I love Farmageddon, and I'm going to go with Iowa State. I believe, the lines makers have them actually less than a field goal favorite, about 2.5-point favorite here. I like Iowa State in this one.
So let's head to Provo. What an emotional roller coaster ride the BYU Cougars have been on the last handful of weeks, from that emotionally charged win in Salt Lake against rival Utah. What a crazy finish to that. I think in the last couple of weeks, we've seen how much fuel that might have taken out of BYU. Back-to-back losses, including, you talk about a crazy finish, the loss at Arizona State this past weekend. Now they have to find a way to bounce back from that and close the season on a high note. Houston at BYU, the top 2 defenses in the Big 12. Houston, meanwhile, dead last in offensive rankings and total offense in the Big 12, made a change in coordinators this week. I don't know if that'll help provide some kind of spark for their offense, but what do you see playing out? Houston at BYU in the Battle of the Cougars.
Yeah, I think BYU should definitely come out of here with the win. And the strange thing about BYU games, you go back to Oklahoma State. They won that game, but probably should have lost it. They played Utah, and they won that game, but probably should have lost it. Then the Kansas game comes around. They lost that game, but probably should have won it. They had a 354 to 242 yard edge. They get a fumbled punt return late in the game that set up Kansas's winning touchdown. So it's almost like they if they outplay their opponent, they lose, and if they get outplayed, they win. And it's a strange thing about BYU. And with Houston, the way I would sum up their season is what you touched on: excellent defense. They're actually holding opponents to 82 yards per game below the season average, number 14 in the country. Offensively, they've struggled all year, been shut out twice, could have been shut out by UNLV, could have even been shut out by Arizona. They only scored 3 points in that game. They're going up to BYU. You've got the altitude advantage. So I think BYU clearly wins this game. Tough to lay a lot of points with 2 really good defenses. Under might be a good play here. But I would lean with BYU to get this one probably by about 2 scores.
2 teams heading in different directions here, Phil, as TCU and meets up with Cincinnati in Nippert Stadium. Cincinnati has lost 4 straight after a 5-2 start to the year. TCU, meanwhile, has won 4 of their last 5. Their only loss coming to one of the hottest teams in the country in Baylor. So Horned Frogs looking for win number 8. Cincinnati trying to find their way to a bowl game. What's going to happen here between the Horned Frogs and the Bearcats?
I like Cincinnati at home. And check this out. You look at the last 2 weeks for TCU. They have played 2 of the weakest teams in the Big 12 at home, Oklahoma State and Arizona. Now they've got to go on the road. Let's look what Cincinnati's done. They've played 2 of the best teams in the Big 12, Iowa State and Kansas State, on the road. And prior to that, they outplayed West Virginia, but somehow lost the game via the turnover. So I think when you look at Cincinnati, they're an underrated team. And now the situation favors them. Meanwhile, with TCU, maybe they got a little healthy playing some bad teams at home, and now they got to go on the road and play this one in cold weather. So I definitely like Cincinnati to pull the upset here over TCU, and I think we see Cincinnati return to the form they had earlier in the year when they were 5-2.
Hi, Phil. Now to the main event. We got West Virginia heading to Lubbock, trying to close the season with a perfect 4-0 record on the road in conference play. The Mountaineers haven't won in Lubbock since 2018. You have 2 pass defenses that have struggled mightily this year. West Virginia giving up 261 a game is 14th in the Big 12. But meanwhile, Texas Tech giving up 309 a game is not just dead last in the Big 12, but they're 133rd out of 134 defenses total in the country. And yet, it kind of feels like which rush defense swells up and plays better. West Virginia coming in at number 6 in the Big 12 against the run, Texas Tech at number 9. Can West Virginia corral Taj Brooks just enough? Can Texas Tech slow down West Virginia's run game just enough? A lot of different storylines here. What do you see unfolding in Lubbock?
Fun game, a lot of points. We got. I think what you have is a Texas Tech defense that's given up yards and points all season long. I've got them number 99 in the country as far as allowing opponents 20 yards above their average, giving up 456 yards per game, 310 through the air. Don't get a lot of sacks. Not a great defense. But they do have good offense and, potent pass offense, which I'd not necessarily liken that against West Virginia's pass defense. And then they've got a dangerous running back in Taj Brooks, probably one of the more underrated running backs in the country. Put up a lot of yards this year, 1,317 yards. And that's 2 straight seasons where he's had big years. He's trying for another 1,500-yard season. So I think there's going to be a lot of points scored. I think the last team with the ball wins this one. So what the heck? Let's take West Virginia plus the points, pull the upset on the road.
Love it. I love it. And maybe, Phil, the other 5 things happen and West Virginia's playing in Arlington. We'll talk about the Big 12 championship with the Mountaineers next week. So maybe it's a little bit of a pipe dream. But last question for you here, Phil. And if that situation doesn't work out and West Virginia ends up falling a little bit short to Texas Tech, that'd put them at 6-6 on the year. You're still going to a bowl game. But considering all that they had coming back this year, how big of a disappointment do you think that would be to go 6-6? What were your expectations coming into the year? What would that line up with the 6-6 record?
Oh, well, they played a pretty tough schedule this year. In fact, you look at that non-conference schedule that West Virginia plays, you're playing teams like Penn State and Pitt on the road. That's not exactly built for success. The over-under for West Virginia this year in Vegas was 6.5. So I can't say it would be a major disappointment. When you lined up the talent and the schedule, expectations were for about a 6-7 win season, and that's where West Virginia's at right now. If they get this win, they actually top the Vegas total for over-under on the year. I would not put the season as a massive disappointment. Maybe West Virginia fans had a higher expectation coming into the year, but for the season, I think West Virginia's on par. Maybe if they didn't get banged up in that the game against Kansas State, it might have been a little different. Maybe if they didn't give up the lead against Pitt, it might have been a little different season. But I think West Virginia's played okay.
Yeah, like I always say, they don't build those buildings in the desert for nothing, right? They have a pretty good idea as to what's going to happen in college football. But Phil, thank you so much again for joining us here this week on this episode of ITG. Again, happy Thanksgiving to you, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. And wishing all of your listeners out there a very happy Thanksgiving.
There it is. Phil Steele, the best in the game. We'll be back on the other side to break down our picks for this week's game between West Virginia and Texas Tech.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing for 72 months, plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. Visit us on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we close things out here on this episode of ITG. It is Black Friday, eve of the final game of the season. It's hard to believe, as Phil said, it's already here. It feels like we were just talking about all the hype going into the Penn State game just a couple of days ago. Here we are, here creeping into the month of December. Jed, we've got some picks to get to. Before we do that, another thank you to Johnston's Equipment. Get 0% financing for up to 72 months with approved credit on select Coyote tractors. In stock now at Johnston Equipment, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Let's head over to that ITG Sportsbook. Jed, what are the wagers that we're going to be placing this weekend?
ITG Prop Fun as we head to Lubbock, looking for our first victory in West Texas since 2018. Let's start off with Taj Brooks. Of course, I said on the preview, I've been reluctant all year to call all of these talented backs that we
The
faced.
best
I
in the
haven't
league.
called any of them the best in the league because I've reserved that for Taj Brooks. I think he might just be the best in the Big 12. And that says something after what we just saw last week with RJ Harvey and some of the others we faced. But he's a very complete back. He really is. They'll use him in a lot of ways, including the pass game. 9 catches against Oklahoma State, a lot of checkdowns, and what a weapon he is when they try and push vertical and the coverage drops and they check down to him. Ooh, he's an asset. But this is a guy in Taj Brooks that has run for 109 or more yards in all 10 games he's played this year. Pretty remarkable. Last year versus West Virginia and Morgantown, he ran for 149. 2 years ago in Lubbock, he ran for 107. Taj Brooks currently ranks number 6 in the country in rushing, 132 yards a game. He's number 2 in the Big 12 in rushing at home, 135 yards a game. So the question is quite simply, over under Taj Brooks rushing total against West Virginia, 134 and a half.
That is a healthy number, but it is
a healthy number,
well
a chunky
respected.
number.
I thought you were going to say 125, so I'm not too far off. I'll lean under. I'm going to hold my nose to the window on this one because I don't feel 100% confident. They like to do a lot of things with him in the run game, and he's certainly explosive. But I feel like West Virginia's defense has done a decent job this season against the run for the most part, and I really think Texas Tech's going to try and do everything they can to just pick apart that secondary. And Joey McGuire kind of said so himself in his press conference, said, hey, we're going to come out and try to attack them. So I'm going to lean to the under, but he's still going to get his yardage.
Yeah, and Joey McGuire's 61-minute press conference,
Yeah.
he talked about pretty much everything in under the sun.
Yeah.
But I'm going to agree with you. I do think that he's going to get his yards, probably even his 109 that he's had in every game so far this year. But I think what they're doing is they're looking at the matchups they have on the perimeter against the West Virginia secondary, and they're going to want to exploit that. I think they're going to come out fast. Everything wide open. They're going to try and get an early lead, and I think that's going to involve some drop back, plant and throw it. And Baron Morton's going to play some pitch and catch. Again, 56% of the time they throw the football. That's what this offense does. It's just the thing with Taj Brooks. The other 44% of the time, almost every time he's getting it. So I think they're going to throw it enough to keep him potentially under with West Virginia's 6th ranked rush defense. There's times we boat up against the run. I think we can hold him to 134, which would be enough to hit the under in this case.
Yeah,
so we both
and
have
plus
the under on that.
With the last 2 weeks, he's got, I think, most of his catches have come in the last 2 weeks this season. I think Texas Tech's figuring out they can get him the ball that way too, which is an extension of the run game. So even though he may not get to 134 on the ground, they'll find other ways to get his yardage up as an all-purpose yard.
Other ways to get him touches. That's right. So, okay, there. Question number 2. Moving on to that, there have been obviously some shootouts between these two teams when we faced them on the plains in West Texas. You think of the 34-27 game. Remember where they scored on defense. Yeah. Tony Fields was tossed out for targeting in the first quarter. That really hurt us in that matchup. You think of the 37-34 game with Josh Lambert's walk-off field goal, the game winner. The highest scoring of those shootouts was 42-34, the Will Grier game in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Now, consider this. The over-under out of Vegas for this game Saturday is somewhere in the ballpark of 64.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a twist on that. And we're going to say, will the scoring in this game exceed the 76 combined points in that 2018 game? We're not just going for an over. We're going for a way over.
Dang. When you look at the matchups, it makes you think that that's going to happen. For some reason, though, like I do think this is going to hit the over in Vegas, but I don't know if it's going to be quite as high scoring as that game. For whatever reason, I think WVU is going to be able to hold on to the football, and I think they have to. If they start to play up to Texas Tech's tempo, I just don't think it's going to work out for them. They got to stay within themselves on offense. So if they hold on to the ball, keep Texas Tech's offense on the sideline. I think this game will be played in the high 60s. Not sure if it quite gets to 76.
No, ironically, Skylar, when you look at what's unfolded for them offensively this season, the only team that managed to keep Texas Tech's snap count down, because Texas Tech's number 3 in the country at almost 80 snaps a game, like in the ballpark of 78 snaps a game offensively. Tempo, tempo, tempo. The only team that's managed to do that was Arizona in the desert.
Wow.
Now, that was a game that Texas Tech won on the road, but it was a hard-fought 28-22 game. They only had 58 offensive snaps, but listen to the games or the snap counts they've had since that game. That was 58 snaps. Since then, Baylor, 85. This is Texas Tech's offensive snaps. TCU, 88. Iowa State, 74. Colorado, 87. And last week in Stillwater, 92 snaps. So the more you can do offensively if you're West Virginia to mitigate that snap count, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to take the under as well. And as usually is the case, we agree on the first cup when you force me to diverge later with these picks. But I'm going to take the under as well. That's 76 would be a classic for the ages.
Yeah.
I almost kind of hope for that. But I take the under too. Vegas probably has it pegged in the ballpark of 64.5. That feels right. 34-31-ish, 38-34. You might be getting, I don't know. Crazier things have happened, but moving on. Texas Tech. Now, what I did was I looked at touchdowns responsible for. In other words, that's a category that you look at a quarterback, how many did he pass for, how many did he rush for? I looked at all the Big 12 quarterbacks Texas Tech has faced in league play. Texas Tech has allowed Big 12 quarterbacks to average 2.6 touchdowns per game responsible for passing and rushing. 2.6. Garrett has accounted for 17 touchdowns in 9 games. Question number 3. Against this Texas Tech defense, will that number swell for Garrett? We're attaching an over-under on Garrett's touchdowns responsible for passing and rushing, 2.5.
The over seems so easy because you know there's points going to be scored in this game. You just don't know how they're going to come. You don't know if it's going to be, maybe it's a pick six, a scoop and score, or maybe they just pound the ball at the goal line. I don't know. But I would have to think for West Virginia to win this game, they're going to need Garrett Green to get 3 touchdowns. So I'll go with the over here. I'll go 2 passing, 1 running.
I went with the over 2. So now I have a bonus pick. Okay, just so we can split.
Maybe separate here.
Yeah. Which quarterback will account for more total yards, rushing and passing? Barrett Morton or Garrett Green?
I'm going to go with Barron just because I think he can put up a lot of yardage through the air. Obviously, he's not going to probably run the ball a whole lot. He can, but I mean, if he goes for 350 through the air or 330, which he's very capable of doing, that's going to be a tall task for Garrett, even with the rushing numbers. I think Garrett could run for 100-plus yards, and he'd still maybe fall short. I think West Virginia's going to lean on C.J. Donaldson, Jaheim White. So I got to go with Barron here.
What do you think the two of them average per game right now?
Oh,
Barron Morton's average rushing and passing, Garrett Green's average rushing and passing.
I'm going to say Barron's.
Yep, go ahead. Barron Morton's played 11 games. Garrett's played 9.
Barron's probably around 300. And Garrett, I'm going to say maybe 260-ish, 270-ish.
What? Pretty good. So here's what we got. First of all, bear in mind, I just mentioned Barron
No pun
Morton
intended.
Played, no pun intended, 11 games. So he is poised to make his 12th start. He will be the first Texas Tech quarterback to start all 12 games since Patrick Mahomes in 2016. Remember last year they cycled through 3 quarterbacks. Yep. There's been seasons they cycled through 3 or 4 quarterbacks. This year, he missed a half of a game, but he started all 12 games, or this will be his 12th start. Here's the number, Skylar. Garrett comes in In 9 games, he's averaging 262 a game.
Hey.
Again,
Okay.
bolstered by his rushing total of over 600 yards rushing. Baron Morton, who has negative rushing yards coming in, comes in at 253 a game.
Wow. That's surprising.
So, yeah. Which is why I'm taking Garrett.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting. Yeah, I
we
knew
won the bonus. You got 4 this week.
I knew Barron had not run the ball as much this year as he had in years past, but I figured that high passing total would help him out a little bit. So yeah, that is shocking. But
it's a game plan specific thing. Like there have been times in his career that he's been dangerous with his legs, but they were very intentional with getting involved in the run game when that happened. It's only happened a couple times. Like he had a game this year with 40 some odd yards rushing. Most of the time, he's not running the football, and so the sack yards knock him into the negative column. But it's not that he can't run; it's just that the structure of their offense doesn't ask him to. But yeah, Garrett has lit it up on the ground, and as such, he's at 262 a game.
I got a bonus question for you. Garrett Green rushing yards or Taj Brooks rushing yards? I know it'd be easy to think Taj Brooks, but Garrett has led West Virginia rushing for how many games now?
He has, but I would say this. Outside of getting just outright gashed a couple times this year, Texas Tech has been okay against the run. That's why they're 9th overall. Their pass defense has been wildly porous. Their run defense, not as much. So I would have to go with Taj Brooks with that one. But see that's the thing that alarms me about this matchup. I think that even though Texas Tech has been, West Virginia fans tend to think West Virginia has the worst pass defense in the world. Yeah. We don't, trust me. Not even nearly in the Big 12.
No.
Oklahoma State's way behind us, but Texas Tech is behind everybody. Okay. The difference to me is Texas Tech, by the design and structure of their offense, is kind of built to exploit West Virginia's weakness, directly exploit West Virginia's weakness in the secondary. West Virginia is a far more balanced offense. The pass game feeds off the run game feeds off the pass game. So it's not as though we're built to just drop back and shred you 50 times through the air. The teams that do that are the teams that have had their way with Texas Tech's secondary. That's the intriguing part of the matchup. Even though Texas Tech pass defense has been so much worse than West Virginia's, I don't know that West Virginia's offense is built to capitalize on that quite as directly as Texas Tech offense is built to capitalize on our weakness.
Yeah, that's partially why I'm going to actually go bold here and lean with Garrett. And I know Taj Brooks is as dangerous as they come, but I think this could be a game, again, where maybe Garrett has 20 carries. It's not, crazy to think that that's going to be the case. Texas Tech, they have been decent against the run. The one thing I would mention, they're 12th in the Big 12 out of 16 teams in yards per attempt allowed. So that is one thing to watch out for. But again, you're right. Taj Brooks is so dangerous. It wouldn't be that surprising if he outrushed Garrett Green. But I think Garrett's going to have to play a big part on the ground game for West Virginia to have a chance in this game to win.
One more point.
Yeah.
That this will involve Garrett. I think it's going to be the type of game we're almost going to need to do to some extent what we did last week in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech has deficiencies across the board defensively, but the one area defensively that they're pretty daggone good at is third down defense.
I think they're third in the
number
league.
2 in the conference.
Or two,
second or third. They're right up there. 35%. 65% of the time they get you off the field on third down. So this could very much be like last week. And what I mean by that is Neil Brown doesn't view the third downs as a 1-down proposition, but a 2-down proposition. Last week we were successful on third down, but we were 4-4 on fourth down. Sometimes when it's 3rd and 6, he's thinking 4 downs when he makes his play call, and the lion's share of those involve Garrett, right?
Yeah.
In the run game. So that might even tilt a few more carries Garrett's direction if it turns into that style of game in which we're going for it on fourth down 4 or 5 times, because once again, we're going to have to find a way to extend drives at all costs and extend the time of possession and play keep away from this Texas Tech offense. And Garrett's legs are going to have to be a critical part of that, as are CJ's, as are Jaheim's. But if it turns into the type of game where we're going for it on fourth down and nobody goes for it on fourth down like we do, If that happens, which I fully expect it to, Garrett will be heavily involved in those transition down sequences, those end of possession down sequences.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have to go for it a lot on fourth down. Points are going to be scored in this game. Field goals aren't going to get it done. Punts aren't going to get it done. So anytime it's fourth and very manageable, I think you're going to see the offense stay out on the field for that. So that's going to do it for this edition of ITG with Phil Steele on Black Friday. We wish you guys, again, a happy Thanksgiving. And as always, be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WV football podcast, In the Gun. Make sure you smash that subscribe button here on our YouTube page. Give us a follow on X at In the Gun Podcast. Partake in our weekly pick'ems. You can compete against the other three guys because I'm so far behind. I'm the caboose of this thing this year. Last year I was in the mix. I think I either won it or came down to the end and fell short to West. So I can't remember what happened, but I'm having a down year. I'll bounce back next year. But anyways, for Wesley Euler, for the Runaway Beer Truck, for the Signal Caller, I'm Scala Callahan. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week to recap the Mountaineers and the Red Raiders.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.